Clean water here and abroad. So millions in Somalia are suffering from a historic drought, leaving people without water. On this show, we do talk a lot about the water crisis, particularly the water crisis here in the United States of America. It is happening all over the world. It is not just us. We have one earth, one Mother Earth, and Mother Earth is not being taken care of at all. We do need a global answer, a global fix to the climate chaos that plagues this world at the hands of both incompetence and arrogance of human beings. And the entire ecosystem is in jeopardy. The last time I checked, as human beings, we need water, clean air, and clean food. We cannot subsist without it. And so we are looking at our sisters and brothers and family and friends abroad, and that is in Somalia. This is the worst drought that Somalia has experienced in 40 years. The culprit here, climate chaos. Let's take a look at this graphic. 5 years of climate change induced drought causes starvation in Somalia. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that there is a correlation between not having clean water and the impact it has on being able to have food. You need water to have food, especially the food that comes from Mother Earth. Climate chaos is taking its toll, and there are real human lives behind this toll. Let us not forget. 4 failed rainy seasons led to the following: no rainfall consequences, barren harvest, depleting livestock, thinning resources. Again, let's connect the dots here, you all. And this could be us. And so this is why any global lack is important for us. There are push-pull factors here as to why people suffer, why people have to migrate sometimes. And this is going to impact the entire world, not just Somalia. So this no rainy consequence has caused the following: 1 million Somalis have been forced to leave their home in search of safety, food, and water. 8 million people across Somalia experience high levels of acute food insecurity. Let me put this another way: people are hungry. That's it. I mean, David, we always find the pretty words, and I get it. And this is not casting aspersion on the person that wrote this. They wrote it, and that's beautiful. Food insecurity, that is what it is. But when we break this down to the fundamentals, people are hungry. They don't have enough food to eat. Their bellies are growling, and they can't think like that. You can't be optimal. You can't function optimally if you are hungry.
Yeah, and the margin for the cushion in a place like Somalia is far less, of course, than say the margin of error. If a lot of Americans think of climate crisis, oh my God, some of our coastal communities might be underwater. We're gonna have more hurricanes, we're gonna have more thunderstorms, et cetera, and maybe people will have to move away from the coast. Okay, maybe that's something of a burden on people who have homes on the coast. But imagine the burden if you're like 1 or 2, bad crops away from going hungry. I mean, Americans are not going hungry because of the climate crisis. They may just have to move and their property might get damaged. It is so much more severe in a place like Somalia. And oh, by the way, the biggest contributor to the climate crisis, those of us here in the United States, we accounted for 25% of all the pollutants in the air for the last many years. China's now getting close to us, but we are responsible for this. We're responsible for the climate crisis. So Americans cannot simply look away and think, oh, well, because this is Somalia, this is not my problem.
No, we can't. 25%, and we're only 5% of the world's total population. So wrap your mind around that. But the effects of this go even deeper. Without a harvest, neither people nor animals can survive unless outside assistance is provided. Resource scarcity has only been compounded by the economic impact of COVID-19. And the rising costs due to Russia's war in Ukraine, a country known as Europe's breadbasket, from which Somalia imports 90% of its wheat. So even with this, and thank you Yahoo News for this, it is showing us that we are all connected, that it really is a fine line. It is it's very delicate. And if anything impacts the balance, all the dominoes fall. And that is what is happening in Somalia right now. And the global pandemic itself, which is shame on the United States and other industrialized nations. David, you probably recall that early on in the pandemic, these nations were slow to respond to other nations' needs, and Africa is a continent and one of the last to even get any help whatsoever when it came to getting the vaccines out to poor countries and poor, nations. And that just really turned my stomach at that time, and it still does even to this moment. So poverty experts are weighing in on this. Right now, it's the livestock that's at risk, and next is going to be our children. Margaret Mueller. I mean, it doesn't, she laid that. David?
I mean, I sometimes like in some of these issues to sort of think about, well, what really are Republicans concerned about? And so to my Republican friends who are out there, if you don't care about the humanity and the starvation, and you're only really focused, say, on political instability or the rise of terrorism, that's another reason to care about this. I seem to remember something called Black Hawk Down when we lost US troops in Mogadishu, Somalia because of political instability there. When you have these sorts of climate crises, when you have people starving in a place like Africa, you're gonna have more political instability, you're gonna have more terrorism. So even if that's your only gauge as to whether or not this should be important to the United States, it's important because we need these countries to be stable for all of us, even if that's your only concern, is our safety and being immune somehow from terrorism.
So true, what a great reminder. And you're making me think of one of the most quotable people to ever walk the face of the earth, and that's the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he said, what affects one directly affects us all indirectly. And David, you just laid out a whole litany of why we should care. Pick the reason. You gave a whole bunch of reasons. If it's not moral, then maybe it's geopolitical, but pick your reason why we should care about what is happening in Somalia. And this is not the first time that Somalia has experienced famine. Unfortunately, the last famine was in 2011. A famine designation will be too late. People are already dying. During the last famine in Somalia in 2011, half of all deaths occurred before famine was declared. The international community pledged to never again allow famine in Somalia or wait so long to act, but it is repeating the same mistake this year. Somebody already defined what insanity is, and that is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And I would venture, David, if this was another nation, people would not be as cavalier, but because it is Somalia on the continent of Africa, it is easier to have a, we'll get to it when we get to it, attitude, because we know that Black people in the diaspora, we understand the racial struggles and biases, and I do see this as another example of anti-Blackness. But most people in the US are unaware of what's going on in East Africa, according to data collected by rescue.org. 69% of US respondents were not aware there was a drought in East Africa. Thank God that we're reporting this right here on Unbossed on the TYT network. But that poll did find something interesting regarding climate change. 57% said politicians are not doing enough to address climate change and related food shortages. And again, that's coming from rescue.org. And that's really good because now, David, I see an opening there that 57% of people saying that politicians are not doing enough.
Yeah, no, there's certainly an opportunity to sort of galvanize public opinion and to get people sort of more involved and get our government more involved. I'm just, and I'm going to show my age here. I remember, 38 years ago when there was a horrible drought in Africa, and there was a bunch of American musicians and stars who got together and they did "We Are the World" and race consciousness so that we would end these sort of droughts. If somebody would have said 38 years ago, well, imagine in the future, we're gonna have these same problems and we're gonna have the same racist-based ignorance of them because Americans don't wanna talk about Black people in Africa, I would have said, no, we're gonna make a lot more progress. We're not making the kind of progress that so many of us have wanted. There's a potential for us to do so, and there's a potential for us to bring awareness, but all of us together have to say, you know what, this is a problem that needs to be solved. For whatever the reason is, we have to talk about these issues, we have to talk about the unpleasantries, and we have to figure out some way to solve the climate crisis and to help the countries that are suffering the most.
Absolutely that, because but by the grace of God, there go I, or there go us. Some politicians put up this headline. People may or may not remember this, but Dianne Feinstein lectures children who want Green New Deal, portraying it as untenable. This is part of the problem. Having elected officials who are so out of touch or who lack imagination or who really just don't care. They don't get it, they don't see it, and they're not willing to use their political capital to make a difference. We have got to understand that climate chaos is a clear and present danger to each and every one of us. And depending on where you live, both in this country and also in the world, depends on how fast this crisis hits you. But ultimately, none of us are going to escape this crisis. We must do something about it collectively. Meanwhile, most Americans do support, underline it, underscore it, they do support the Green New Deal. Let's put this graphic up that shows where the majority of voters are on the Green New Deal. They're right there. They do support it. They do understand that we need this. And not only will this help us and help Mother Earth, it will help bring different and new jobs. It will make this country more sustainable. Yeah, we should go ahead and do that. It is so important. So David, we're gonna keep an eye on this too, hopefully. And I do remember We Are the World. I really do. And that was a great campaign. A really great campaign.
And I just want to say really quickly, I'm so glad that you put up the public polling on this, that most Americans do support the Green New Deal. And so a lot of people think, well, then why isn't it happening? Well, when we attack our corrupt political system, the influence of corporations and lobbyists and whatnot in Washington, it helps all kinds of problems. Some of the reasons that all these issues that have widespread American support don't get through Congress is because a lot of lobbyists and a lot of corporate powers are blocking it, and they've bought members of Congress. And so to the extent that we can break the gridlock and end this political corruption, a lot of these problems can get solved.
There it is. The owner donors they never sleep. So the rest of us can't either. People of good consciousness, no matter how you identify on the political spectrum. I hope that a few things that we can agree on. We need clean water, clean air, clean food, a nation that is productive in that way, that is pushing other nations, and to have a worldwide effort to stop droughts from happening, not only in Somalia, but all over the world where people are suffering. Again, what happens to one directly happens to us all indirectly. True words by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It fits on so many issues.